As we start the sugya of Beisai, the sugya of the birchas peiros ha'oretz. What bracha do we make on various peiros ha'oretz? It's an unbelievable chap of the Aguda to choose this topic specifically, the sugya of brachas, because we understand, Klal Yisrael understands that a yid doesn't say a bracha. There's no such thing as a yid that comes and says a bracha. He's saying a bracha. A yid macht a bracha. A yid makes a bracha. It's a machta bracha. What's the chilik sufficient if you say a bracha or if you make a bracha? Because when you mach a bracha, that's called that you're tapping in to the Rebbeinu Shalom's source of giving bracha. By making a bracha, by maching a bracha, you're tapping into that source. When we mechazik ourselves in brachas and we say the baruch, we're giving the full realization that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the makor of bracha. And that all comes from the Helik Bashefer. The Baruch is a Shaila, Makor bracha. The Hashem is a Shaila, is Adayin Koil, is the Rebbeinu Shalom is the boss. But the one thing is clear is Atah. When we say Baruch, Atah, we're speaking straight to the Helik Bashefer. We're speaking right to the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're not even talking in third person to the Rebbeinu Shalom. We're speaking straight to the Rebbeinu Shalom. And we're saying, Makor bracha, you are the boss, Rebbeinu Shalom. And it's Mechazakas and Emunah, Shahakol Niebed Varoi. Everything is in the Rebbeinu Shalom's desire, control, his deeper, and everything like we're seeing today, the Rebbeinu Shalom can end it in a flash. He can end this entire matziv. So it's mechazikas. It's mechazikas that he's the boirei pri, the boirei pri ha'etz, the boirei pri ha'adama. And when we tap into this koyach ha'boisai, especially al yedei, the limit of the sugya of brachas, so then that itself is clearly a tremendous schus for us, and that should be a schus for us and for our families and for all of Klal Yisrael. The limit of the sugya of brachas. And what more to say than what it says in the Gemara? The Gemara says, Tanra Banan, also la'adam, she'enem min ha'olam hazeh b'lei bracha. You're not allowed to get to know in this world without making a bracha. The bracha is me'ila. So the Gemara has to kasha, maita konte. So what do? The Gemara doesn't mean if you mess up. The Gemara means what should you do to avoid? It says the Gemara, yelech eitzel the Talmud Chacham. So the Aguda brings us all together to be able to learn together. V'yalamdeinu brachas, today that we shouldn't come to the me'ila. And for what's the opposite of the me'ila? The opposite of me'ila is hektish, is appreciating that hektish and that kedusha that we have the ability to be mevarech and to make these brachas. So the Maisa, let's get right into the sugya. This is such a geshmakas sugya. It's a sugya of trying to figure out what's the bracha on different various berries, what's the bracha on pineapples and papayas and cranberries and blueberries and the bananas and all the different shilas, which seemingly some of them seem simple to us and some of them are not so simple, but we'll see chutz from the etzim halacha l'maisa that comes out from the sugya, which is quite interesting and quite maybe even eye-opening, if not shocking in certain ifanim. We'll see in Mitzvah Hashem. But more so, it's a geshmakas sugya, and we'll learn together the sugya to try to understand where it's neveya from. What's keveya? Because if I was trying to figure out what's a boirei priya eitz, what's an eitz, what's a tree, stama, I would open up. I'm an old man, Rabbi Isai. I would open up an encyclopedia. Today you wouldn't open. You would press an encyclopedia, a Wikipedia or some other Wikipedia, and you would find that what's a tree. So if you're going to do that, they're going to come out. A tree is some tall feisnish, some tall trunk, and the fruits that come on it. If that's going to be the definition, we're going to be very confused. Because we know that a banana, and I just saw that Aguda has these wonderful pictures, and I'm going to ask the Gottesman, the Bamberger, please send them to me. I saw that they actually have very interesting looking pictures over there of all the different things that we're going to talk about today, and I'm sure that this is a good tale list for myself also. But Al Kapanim, in the future, send it to me, not during this year. But Al Kapanim, when it comes to the definition from the encyclopedia and Mr. Webster, so then you're going to make the mistake and make a boirei priya eitz on a banana, and you're going to make a boirei priya eitz on a pineapple. Now, before we begin, we'll see in Mitzvah Hashem what exactly is the reason why on a banana we make an adama, and what's the reason why Klal Yisrael makes an adama on a pineapple. But we know that that's the minig. So then the Mela, obviously we can't go with the definition because a banana tree can grow up to, as you saw, 40 feet, 50 feet. The banana trees can be quite high. So we have to try today to get the definition clear. What constitutes a boirei priya eitz and what constitutes a boirei priya adama? What gives something the definition of being an adama and what gives something the definition of being an eitz? And this is a very, very, like I mentioned, very, very geschmack at sugya. And we understand that it's extremely negeya to be specific, because Chazal did not suffice, albeit if a person by mistake, bidi evid, would make a boirei priyat dama on, let's say, an apple. So we know, and that's the first halacha over here in Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Gimel, that if a person accidentally would make a boirei priyat dama on an apple, he'd be Yarchei, because the zayd of an apple is the ground. So it's not like he's saying a sheker. And also, if a person would say shahakol, a shakal nimit vaday, if he would make on an apple, he'd be Yarchei. But Chazal required from us a more specific, a more appreciation for the ashkacha of Hashem Yisbarach, dafka on an eitz, that the boirei priyat eitz. We want you to bring out the exact ashkacha that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave. So therefore, it's extremely important for us to try to figure out what exactly is the bracha on a blueberry, on a banana, on an apple. And it's not enough to just say, b'diavad, if I make an adama anyways, I'm Yarchei. Avada, that is going to be one of the factors when we're dining shilas today, if we'll have certain sfeikus and certain unclarities. That we'll say, no, if you make an adama, you're going to be Yarchei b'diavad, but certainly not as a lichatchila. Not the Mishabur himself says mefurish at the end of Siman Reish Vav, that a person should never go, at the end of Reish Beis, excuse me, one should never just say, oh, I don't know, so I'll just make a shackle. Go and learn. And that's exactly what we're coming to do, is to go and learn the sugya. So what does it say in the sugya? And you have one line of Gemara that everything that we're going to talk about today is Neveah from that one line of Gemara. The Gemara says in Brachas, on the end of Daf Mem, the Aleph, the Talmidei Chachamim saw the Gemara, I'm sure. The Gemara says, Heichad mevarchin an boirei priyat eitz. When is it that something is considered a tree that we make a boirei priyat eitz? So the Gemara says, Heichad dekishokles leila peira, that when you take off the fruit, it means after the harvest, isa legavza v'hodar mafik. So the gavza, which I won't translate yet, because that is exactly the source of controversy in machlekes today. But when you take away the fruit after the harvest, the gavza, this something, hadar mapik, seems to remain. But if you take away the fruit, leisa legavza, so then the gavza does not remain, so then such a thing is a boirei priyat dama. That's the Gemara. What's a gavza? The Gemara seems to say, if I have a fruit and the fruit is attached to this gavza, and even after I remove the fruit, the gavza remains, that's a boirei priyat eitz. The idea being that it's not considered connected specifically to the ground. There's a medium that we have to reckon with. We have to be mischashed with that medium. Then it would be a boirei priyat eitz. But the Gemara says that if I take away the gavza, if when I take away the fruit, the gavza doesn't remain, whatever this gavza is, so then that is considered that you're really straight connected to the ground, and you're a boirei priyat dama. Now, what's this gavza? So this is a world war, Rabbi Yisai. Doesn't machlek, it's a vision, the Rosh and the Ge'oinim. The Rosh is brought, I think the Olam saw the Rosh. The Rosh is brought, obviously, in the Masechta, in Brachas, in Perek Vav, in Siman Chav Gimel. The Rosh seems to learn that the gavza is the roots. The basic idea being that when you have a tree, we'll loosely translate, but when you have a tree, and the tree, even if the tree disappears in the winter, but the roots remain, and I need not replant this tree, and then next year it will grow on its own. So there's enough of a makor, there's enough of a presence that still exists, that this is called a tree. So for example, it could be the tree will go away in the winter, what we call a tree, the translation. The Rosh said that still will be a boirei priyat eitz, so long as the roots remain. Nishar Roshim, says the Rosh. So then I don't have to replant. It's a shaila exactly how to learn the Rosh and the Achreinim, but I'm just going to give a loose translation. If you don't have to replant, so then that is considered a boirei priyat eitz. If I have to replant, so then it's kol kulai, the misyaches to the ground, and that's a boirei priyat dama. But if I don't have to replant, even though the tree has gone away, in such a case, I would still make a boirei priyat eitz. If the tree, what we call the tree, remains, and of course you'll make a boirei priyat eitz. But even if the tree doesn't remain, but the roots remain, and I need not replant, that is going to be a boirei priyat eitz. That's the sheet of the Rosh. The sheet of the Ge'oinim is not like that. The Ge'oinim, and it's brought down the Ge'oinim, and the Mordechai brings the Ge'oinim, others bring the Mordechai, the Torah brings the Ge'oinim, Torah and our Siman. The Ge'oinim go with a different translation, the Gamrei of Gavza. They learn Gavza, which is, I don't know, you have to look in the art scroll. How does the art scroll translate Gavza? But A gavza, they learn, is a trunk. If the tree is here and it remains from year to year and it doesn't die in the winter, so then that is, maybe a couple of branches will come off and maybe the leaves will fall off. But if the tree remains from shana to shana, that's a tree. If the tree does not remain, even though it'll grow up on its own again, that is not a tree. That's a boirei pri adama. And that is the Shitas HaGainim, and this is like one of the biggest machlekes in all of Hilchos Brachos, and certainly that is the entire basis and foundation of everything we're going to talk about today. This is the machlekes between the Gainim and the Rosh. That do we say that something is called a tree because the roots remain and that's enough for us? Or no, I need more. The Gainim need more. In order for it to be a Bari Pri Eitz, I have to have that the trunk remains throughout the winter. That's the machlekes. What's the nafkamina of this machlekes? Just to bring out the point, nafkamina is a banana. What do I mean? The nafkamina is a banana. So, like you heard already, I was to hear the end of Rabbi Gottesman's shir, and at the end of the shir, Rabbi Gottesman brought down that in Siv Kimball over here, the Shulchan Aruch talks about these Moises, and you have to know how the Litvaks would say it. But Moises, this Moises, it seems to say the bracha is a Bari Pri Adama. What's this Moises? So the emes is, Aruch HaShulchan says, I don't know what's a Moises. And Ramosha Feinstein Zeichat Tzadik Levelcha and Sinan Pei Vav says, I don't know what the Moises is. Stam, and that tshuva of Ramosha is something unbelievable. That tshuva of Ramosha, they asked him all various things. A lot of the questions we'll talk about today, the tshuva before, and then that tshuva, there's blueberries in that tshuva, there's other things in that tshuva. Moshe writes, they asked him in this Mishnah Berurah, there's tons of words that hard to understand. They asked him about some shtussel missile and all types of interesting words over here in the Mishnah Berurah. Moshe says, he asked him, what's this? Moshe says, I don't know. They asked him, what's that? He says, I don't know. They asked Moshe, what's that? By the Moises, what's that? Moshe says, I don't know. And then Moshe says, but it doesn't matter, because all you need in this sugya is the klalim. If it has the klalim of what Chazal consider to be a tree, then it's a tree. If it doesn't have the klalim, so then it's not a tree. So who cares what it's called? So go to the forest and take a look how it grows, and then you're going to know what the halacha is. You see the Ramosha that knew everything. Ramosha knew Kallah Tevikula. Ramosha told us over here, don't get nervous and don't feel bad if you don't understand what these berries are and what these are. But Ramosha didn't know what a Moises is, because Ramosha, albeit he knew everything, but he didn't speak Arabic, and we speak Arabic over here in the Holy Land. And I will tell you that a Moises, like you heard from Rabbi Gottesman, is a banana. So this is what it says in Shulchan Aruch and Siv Gimel, that a Moises, a banana, is a Bari Pri Adama. Now, what's this banana? So this banana is a good example of the machlekes between the Rosh and the Goyim, and now you're seeing it practically. The Rosh is going to tell you, I'll tell you what a banana is. A banana tree, it's true it doesn't make it in the winter because it doesn't have a strong enough tree to be able to last the winter, but you don't have to replant the banana tree. And a banana tree grows from its roots. So according to the Rosh, the banana tree is going to be a Bari Pri Eitz. If you make a Bari Pri Eitz on a banana, you did the right thing according to the Rosh. The Go'onim will tell you, but the tree doesn't remain in the winter. And since the tree does not remain in the winter, so therefore, that's not a tree. The fact that it grows again, that's really, there's like Kivyachol, a tube that connects me to the ground, and it's not really the tree. The tree doesn't have a chashivas. The Go'onim tell you a banana is a Bari Pri Adama, and that's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. Now, we ourselves would have thought that this psak of Shulchan Aruch is based on a suffix, because everybody say, make a Bari Pri Adama, you don't lose. Make a Bari Pri Eitz, and you do lose. If you make a Bari Pri Eitz on a tomato, you're not Yarchei. So if I tell you that according to the Goyim, a banana is a tomato, so then why would I take a chance and make a Bari Pri Eitz on a banana when possibly it's a tomato? It's a Bari Pri Adama. So when in doubt, just do like the Goinim, because he might say, even according to the Rosh, if you make a Bari Pri Adama, and this is what we would have thought is the pshat in the psak of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. The Ramah also in Siv Beis paskins the exact same way, and we would have thought it's a psak be safek. Who can be machriya between the Rosh and the Goinim? And this is exactly what it says in the Maimer Mordechai. He says, who can be machriya and decide who's right, the Rosh or the Goinim? Who can be machriya? So you make a Bari Pri Adama be safek. But I must tell you, it's a very interesting idea. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman Reish Vav in Sivkatin Beis, the Mishnah Berurah says not like that. The Mishnah Berurah says that the psak of Reish Gimel in the Haggadah over there was bivadai, and if you make, this is a tremendous nafkamina. The nafkamina is, what happens if I by mistake made a Bari Pri Eitz on a banana? And I imagine that people would certainly make this mistake. It's a person, I'll give you an example. Fellow walks out, comes into the he's got a banana tree in the backyard, and he sees the bananas and he sees the tree and he has a tremendous spilus. So he takes it off and he wants to thank the Rebbeinu Shalom. He looks at this wonderful tree and he says, "Boy, Eitz." Says he Yarchei b'diavad. So the Maimer Mordechai says a resounding yes, because according to the Rosh, that's the bracha. We say not like that. We safek. We paskin like the Gainim. But the Mishnah Brura, Rabbeinu, Chafetz Chaim paskin's not like that. It's unbelievable. The Chafetz Chaim says we paskin like the Gainim bivadai, and if you made a bari priya eitz on a banana, you're not Yarchei even b'diavad. A fabulous chiddush, absolute fabulous chiddush. Aloch l'maisa, obviously, I have Moira and Pacha to say even a thought against the Mishnah Brura. And the Mishnah Brura had the Maimer Mordechai open on the table. But it is a little bit scary because the Balatanya, the Graz, in the Siddur, also seems to paskin like this chiddush of the Maimer Mordechai, that our psak about a banana is only a psak, not mi vadai, but only a psak, mi safek. And therefore, if a person would make a bari priya eitz on a banana, l'chayra, I would say maybe take one bite and don't eat any more but the plot thickens, Rabbi Isai. The plot thickens. Because don't make a mistake and accidentally make a bari priya eitz on a banana because the plot thickens. There's an Or L'Tzion, Rabbi Tzion Abbas Shaul, great Sfardish Poisik that he was. And he brings down over here in Chelik Beis in Perek Mem Vav in Oislam Etes. He says, I tell you, Rabotai, a banana is a bari priya dama bivadai. And if you make a bari priya eitz, you're not Yarchei. And not because of what we said, not because of the Mishnah Brura that the psak of the Geonim is a psak of vadai, but for a different reason. He says, I'll prove to you that you hold a banana is a bari priya dama bivadai and not a bari priya eitz. He says, I'll prove it to you. Because if not, so then I never heard of anybody, says the Or L'Tzion, that's makbid on orla when it comes to bananas. So he says, Harein chutz laaretz, you could say it's a safek, and safek orla in chutz laaretz is a lachal, the Moshe Sinai that it's mutter. Okay, but in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi say, orla, even safek, is an isser, and an isser deraisa, safek deraisa l'chumra. He says, if you really had a safek, because the rules that we are talking about today, Rabbi say, if you want to look good and look like a Talmud Chacham, somebody asks you afterwards, your wife says, what are you learning these days? You say brachas. She doesn't know everybody learns brachas. You tell her, I'm learning Orla. Because the rules that we're learning are the exact same rules when it comes to Orla. At least the klalim are the same. So the Rebbe Zion Abba Shaul says, when it comes to a banana, I never saw anybody, says the Rebbe Zion Abba Shaul, that was makbid on Orla when it comes to a banana. So if it's a machlokes between the Rosh and the Geonim, so it's true in Chutz Laaretz, my friends, that the Mitzvah Shabbat will be here one day, you won't have to worry about it, because Safek Orla and Chutz Laaretz is mutter. But in Eretz Yisrael, we should be machmir on the first 3 years of the banana tree. And the Rebbe Zion says, no one is. He says, how could you dare not be machmir? It's at least a Safek. Elamai, says Rebbe Zion Abba Shaul, because Bet Yosef, paskin, like the Geonim, bivadai, it's 100% not a tree, and therefore you make on it a bari priya dama. And therefore says Rabbi Zion Abba Shaul, if you by mistake made a bari priya eitz on a banana, you're not Yarchei. Unbelievable. Now, I did see that Rabbi Vaja, Zechariah Levacha, he has a little bit of an answer in Chelik Ches and Simin Chavav. This is a very big chiddush. He says, well, it's true that we're not makbid on Orla and Eretz Yisrael when it comes to banana. He says, but that's because it's ke'ein a roiv. It's not the pshat that it's a safek, it's true. We do paskin like the Geonim, but we 90% paskin like the Geonim. Not like, it's like roiv, it's 90%. We consider it like a 90%, like as if to say the rush is, it's not a safek, it's not a 50%, but the Geonim is like 95%, 99% that the Geonim are right. So when it comes to Orla, it's no longer a Safek Orla. It's interesting, chap. It's no longer a Safek Orla. It's considered now like, we'd say, a Roiv. Roiv, when it comes to Orla, we're going to be Mekalon. He says, Mashenken, when it comes to Brachas, so by Brachas, Avada, we're not going to go and, even on a Sveika and on a Roiv, we're not going to allow you to make a Bracha. So therefore, why take a chance, even if there's a 1% chance, and we'll say to make a Bari Priya Dama. So halacha l'maaseh by side, don't mess up, because if you mess up on a banana, you're ganzen messed up. Because I would just tell a person if he messes up on a banana, he makes a bari priya eitz. I don't know what to tell you. Go and find I don't know what to tell you. go and find some a tomato that you didn't plan on eating and go and make the bracha on that, because it's a very big shot. According to the Mishnah Berurah, you're not Yarchei. According to Rabbi Sian, you're not Yarchei. And it's not so pashit. So I'm going to leave it as not pashit, and we'll go weiter. That's legabe, the etzim foundation of the machlekes. But Rabbi say, I'm just not making the bracha out loud because I'm chayshish there's a time discrepancy, even of a few seconds. I'm not sure 100%. And I don't want to be machshel the oilam and making it amen yisayim. Even those that are making amen when it comes to a telephone conversation, that's because there's probably no time discrepancy at all. So therefore, you don't have a problem. But here, I'm a little bit nervous that sometimes there could be a time discrepancy and there could be freezing on the, the Zoom sometimes gets a little bit cold. So I'm a little bit chayshish. But upon him, that's why I didn't make it out loud. But Rabbi say, let's begin weiter. Now we go into the very geschmack sugya, the sugya of berries. Now, when I grew up, where I come from, there's a proverb. I'm going to try today to figure out if this proverb is real, if it's true, if it's not. There's different proverbs. For example, all apples are eights except for pineapples and snapple. We'll see if that's so pashut. Then there's another proverb. All nuts are eights except for peanuts, which is a dam obviously, and donuts. Okay. Another proverb. Another proverb is where I come from. All berries are eights except for strawberries. That was the proverb that I heard in Alter Shtetl, in the Heim, with the Megarif in Flatbush. That was the old proverb. That's a very not pashut proverb, and that's what we're going to do today. The emiskite, and that look kind of them zug, is that an emistik zug that all berries are eights except for strawberries, which of course brings us to the dibber of strawberries and the medubber of blueberries and blackberries and all the raspberries and cranberries and kreisenlach and all the different zachen. Again. So first of all, you look over here, the first thing the Mishnah Berurah talks about are these melons. And when you read the Mishnah Berurah, you think melons, and he has a suffix, and he says that melons might be a dama, and there's a shaila, people make an eights on melons. Melon, watermelon, honeydew, cantaloupe, all these things. Of course it's a dama. I'm going to tell you the secret of Isai. Melons in Yiddish does not mean, or I don't know what language it is, I must admit, maybe it's Russian, or I don't know, Russian or Polish, but the melons that the poskim are taking on over here, they're referring to raspberries. That's what these melons are. The HaShulchan seems to say so, and that's what the poskim take on, that these things are what we call raspberries. Now, it's true that raspberries are very generally infested with bugs and whatnot, and but l'maisa, it could be that a person got some type of a crop of raspberries that are not infested. So what exactly is the bracha of a raspberry? But it's very important because to understand the limit of a raspberry. Kipshutai, if you want to know what's a raspberry, so you say, listen, just go to the field and figure it out. Is it a tree that lasts from year to year? And that's it. That's all you need. And that's basically what the Mishnah Berurah says over here. The Mishnah Berurah says, he brings down a Chai Adam. He says, Al tutem magdelim b'sneh, that are called mulberries. Those are the mulberries, which also I think are infested. And the melons, he says, you should know, yesh, some of these things, they gedelim be'ilan, and you make on them a bari priya eitz. V'keina melons shalanu. Our melons, you make a bari priya eitz. It's a dua, because there's a tree, and the tree lasts from year to year. And basically, the Mishnah Berurah says that even though you look in Shulchan Aruch and he seems to say certain berries are dama, so he says, look at the Mishnah Berurah, that's not our berries, because our berry, the tree lasts from year to year. Reading the Mishnah Berurah, you would say a raspberry, pashit a bright creates. And you look in the Aruch HaShulchan over here, and in Orla, he says, al Weinverloch and Smadarnishes and Argosins and melons, which I'm telling you is raspberries, is the bracha of Boirei Priya Eitz. They're Ilanis Gemurim, they're full trees. And who cares that there may be a bit low down or whatever? They're Meskaimin, they last the whole entire winter. And then he says, Vayisi, I see, Mishakasav on the melons, you make a Boirei Priya Dama. He's probably referring to the Balatanya, the Graz, maybe even the Taz. They held there was an Adama. He says, Tamua. He says, it's Tamua, and we make a Boirei Priya Eitz. Adkan, the Aruch HaShulchan, and the Mishnah Berurah. Lemaisa, so what's a loch lemaisa? When it comes to the tachlis, what bracha do you make on a raspberry? So I'll tell you an interesting thing. There's a young man that came to Rishon Zalman Auerbach, the bracha. He told Rishon Zalman, know that Shiloh and raspberries, they bring you down in a certain sefer that in raspberries you say to make a very dama. But I learned up the sugya very well, and I came out from the sugya that you look in the Mishabura, you look in the Shulchan, you look in the Paiskim, and it's a tree. You go into the field and you see that this tree grows and stays from year to year. And there is mamish no shayla to very. So Shlomo Zalman told them there's a certain sefer. I want you to go and read the sefer. What's the sefer? I don't remember now. I think it was called something maybe Kram Tzion, I think it was. He said, go and read that sefer and then come back to me and I'll talk to you. Kids of the single man went and he got the sefer and he read it. Came back to Shlomo Zalman and he said to Shlomo Zalman, now I understand. That sefer, he has mamish, literally tens and tens and tens of shitas that discuss what's the bracha of raspberry. And Shlomo Zalman said these words. He says, Ein beyadeinu lachriya. We have no ability to be machriya. This is an afkamina rabbi also ligabe orla. That we don't have the ability to say it's not orla, and we also don't have the ability to say it's vada yes orla, and we don't have the ability to say it's bari priya eitz, or therefore it says Shlomo Zalman, we suffer gimei bari priya dama. Now why? Why? So it seems to be that the Balatanya, the Graz over here in the Siddur, adds a svara, which I tell you, everybody, it's not a Gemara, and it's a chiddush. He seems to say that anytime you have a fruit, in this case it's a berry, that's growing not out of a branch, but growing straight out of the trunk, so then that is considered not a bari priya. That's coming from the Adama. The whole idea is that the trunk has to be a conduit for the branch, which is growing the fruit. But if you have a metzias of where it's growing straight on the branch, then that's not a bari priya. Murdik Chiddush, you don't see it in the Gemara. It's a graz. There's a different malkia like this in Chelik Hay in the 143rd Tshuva. And the graz was chayshish for this idea. And Rosh Zalman said, Ein b'yadeinu lachriya. Lemaisa, I'm not going to go so into this Shaila Loch Lemaisa, simply because it's not Senegeya. Most of us, I think, don't have raspberries, because I think, and the Oilam will tell me, I don't think even the frozen ones they have. And I think they're cloud, they are infested. But Lemaisa, if somebody would want to know, Mistama would have to make on it a bari priya dama. But if you see somebody making a bari priya eitz, certainly you can't say it's a bracha latala. That would probably be the psak of the Mishabura and the Aruch HaShulchan and the Yarchei paskins like this. And Lemaisa, I once asked Rav Sheinberg, Zeichel Tzadik Levracha, and he told me raspberries is a bari priya eitz. I think if I remember correctly, there's a masham in the Das Torah, not in the Das Torah, the masham in the Tshuva. Masham also says the minig on raspberries is to make a bari priya eitz. Lemaisa, you do avoid the shaila anyways because of the bugs. And by the time that the bugs go away, Mustama Mashiach will come and he'll be paishet these shilas. If somebody makes a bracha, he would probably make an adama. But if he makes a bari priya eitz, he's vaiter sheni yid. That's the bracha on raspberries. Strawberries is a little bit more seemingly simple. Seemingly. There we have a Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says ha puzmakis. Sounds like socks. Right? But the Ramosha and the Tshuva tells us what are puzmakis are, says Ramosha, strawberries. Ramosha writes it out in Yiddish, strawberries. And these are these red fruit that the Mishnah Berurah talks about. And over here, it's very interesting. It's an unbelievable, like an akuda for thought. It's unbelievable. The Mishnah Berurah brings over here that there's the type that grow in the forest, and there's the type that grow in the gardens. Ours, of course, are going to be more like the ones that grow in the gardens, that are cultivated. And the Mishnah Berurah says there's ones that grow in the forest, and they grow maybe like grass and whatever, right? Excuse me. They grow like grass, etc. And the Mishnah Berurah says on those, you make a bari priya dama. But the Mishnah Berurah brings down an unbelievable thing. He says, but those that grow in not the garden, but they grow, the ones that are grown in the garden, that they're cultivated, they grow, they're cultivated. So the bracha on those, says the Mishnah Berurah, is some want to say is a bari priya eitz. Who are these some that say it's a bari priya eitz? So the Mishnah Berurah is quoting here a Chayodam and a Shvis Adam, who quotes a Shlah. And the Shlah is an unbelievable chiddush here. The Shlah says that the Shlah says that even though we said there's a machlekes between the Rosh and the Geonim, that the Rosh said if the roots remain, that's enough, and if you don't have to replant, that's enough. And the Geonim said no, you need the whole entire tree. So the Shlah wants to say a middle ground over here. The Shlah wants to say if you have a tree that partially remains, like maybe all the branches fall off and most of it's gone, and it's partially remains. So the Shla wants to say that everyone will agree, even the Gaonim could agree that that's still a bar priates. Now the Nishmas Adam goes on to argue on this. But what's the difference? The nafkamina is strawberries. Strawberry, the ones that are cultivated at least, the ones that grow wild, they just are like grass. But the Mishnah Berurah says the ones that are cultivated, those seem, says the Mishnah Berurah, to have a tree that doesn't really last the whole entire tree in the winter, but partially the tree will last in the winter. On these, says the Mishnah Berurah, that you should make a bari pri adama. You should, yes, make a bari pri adama, because the shla is a big chiddush. But if you made a bari pri eitz, which is really negaya our strawberries, if I say, if you made a bari pri eitz, the Mishnah Berurah says it's at least enough of a suffix that you take a bite. This is coming from the Mishnah Berurah, that he held that the rush and the gaonim is not even a suffix. We paskin like the gaonim, and he held that you're the yaitza by the case of the banana. But by strawberry, the Mishnah Berurah says here the tree is a little bit different. The branch, the bush does stay somewhat in the winter, and therefore the Mishnah Berurah says here you make a bari pri adama. But if you did not, so the Mishnah Berurah, b'di eved, you should take one bite and then don't eat any more. That's the Psak of Mishnah Berurah. I find this to be unbelievable. Just think about this for a second. Imagine trying to explain this to a guy. You have a strawberry which is grown in the forest, looks like a strawberry, tastes like a strawberry, the exact same strawberry. On that one, you make a bari pri adama. And if you made a bari pri eitz, you probably not right. You have one that grows on this tree that stays the stalk and stays up in the winter. The shla tells you on that one, you make a bari pri eitz. It's the exact same strawberry. This one's adama, this one's eitz. It's unbelievable. You see the nitzchias of our Heilige Torah. It's just unbelievable. That's a baisai when it comes to a strawberry. And that's l'chayra, I would say. These are the more simpler shilas, I would say. And now we come to the blueberry, which the blueberry or baisai is our means of getting into the brisa shilah today, which is craisins and cranberries. So you have to learn good the svaras of blueberry in order to appreciate the cranberry that we're going to talk about in Yitzhak Hashem, the craisins, which is definitely something that people do have, and it is much, they definitely, the craisins are not infested, etc. The blueberries are sometimes difficult to find that don't have the bugs and the scale bugs and all the different zachen, but certainly the svaras of blueberries are extremely, extremely negaya. Here, the Mishnah Berurah, the Chayr, we have first Mishnah Berurah about blueberries. Mishnah Berurah brings the Chayada, Mishnah Berurah in Tzika and Gimel, and he says the pears that are goydel on these little trees that are afshe goyven pachas mi Gimel, they are trees that are under 3 tfachim, like Yagid is Shchayrim. Yagid in Polish is basically berries, and Yagid is Shchayrim is not referring to blackberries, which are actually big trees and probably bari pri eitzes, but Yagid is Shchayrim are blueberries. So Mishnah Berurah says, listen, it's a little small tree. What's the din of these little small trees that are under 3 tfachim? So Mishnah Berurah says, the Magen Avram says, who cares? It's a bari pri eitz. You look in the Gemara, and the Gemara says, a tree is something that lasts the winter. Does this last the winter? Yes. So it's a bari pri eitz. The Mishnah Berurah says, but the minig is not like that. Mishnah Berurah says, ha'olam noyigim to make an adama. Says the Mishnah Berurah, efsher taimam, what's their reason? Now we would have said, what's their reason? Their reason is because they consider a little tree that's under 3 tfachim, they consider a tree which is that short, maybe not to be a tree. And then Shvis Adam has such a tzad. He says, there's a Gemara in Eruvin, on Daf Kuf, that everybody knows. The Gemara says that when you're being mushtamish with a tree, there's an Isra on Shabbos. But the bottom 3 tfachim is called karka. And that's not called mushtamish b'ilan. So the Gemara seems to say, if you have something under 3 tfachim, that's called karka. So maybe that's the svara why the oila makes on these blueberries a bari pri adama. Again, the Mishnah Berurah says l'chayr should be a bari pri eitz, and that's the psak of the Magen Avram, because it's something that lasts from year to year. But says the Mishnah Berurah, the minig oilam is to make an adama. So the Nishmas Adam says maybe the minig is because the tree is very short like that, so therefore it's considered karka and it's considered a bari pri adama. Says the Nishmas Adam, that can't be. That can't be, because there's a Gemara in Saita and Afnan Gimel that the Gemara talks about a yalda, a certain tree which is only a tefach, and it's a very small tree. And the Gemara says that even in the 4th year, it's very short, and you have to be chayshish for orla. The Gemara says because people are not going to realize that that's its size. It's like, I think, those bonsai trees from China. I don't know if I should mention those these days. But Kapanim, it's these little small trees. So the Gemara says that we're chayshish for orla. We're chayshish for orla even in the 4th year. Okay, but what does it say there, says the Nishmas Adam? It says you can have a tree that's a tefach, and it's called a tree. So Bezai, and Shvasadim says, so what is the pshat in the minig oilam that on blueberries they make a bayir pri adama? So the Mishnah says, I'll tell you pshat. And the Shvasadim says, Efshe time in the loy chashiv kol kach pri. Maybe they don't consider it to be kol kach pri. What does he mean? It's not kol kach pri, chashiv pri. It's not chashiv kol kach pri. So I did a little research. I'm sure that the Aguda also has research on this. And it seems to be that about 100 years ago, the blueberries were these small, tiny, little dreadful creatures. Nothing so pretty, nothing so geschmack. I think they were a bit more sour, and they weren't chashiv. They're not like the blueberries that we have now. So that is not a chashiv pri. And maybe when it's not chashiv pri, it doesn't warrant the chashivistic bracha of the extra shkacha of a boirei priya eitz. And therefore you make a boirei priya dama. Ad kan the Mishabura. One that reads the Mishabura comes out like this. The lacha is you should make a boirei priya eitz. Because saif the tree lasts from year to year. But the minig is to make a boirei priya dama. Because it's not chashiv pri. Where does that put us? So you say, well, us today, the blueberries, they sell them by the tens of thousands of tons. And they're certainly bigger and they're certainly chashiv and l'chayra. Even with the minig, you'd make a boirei priya eitz. And Rav Moshe, in a tshuva, and that tshuva that I mentioned before, Rav Moshe in Peiva and Pei, it's the tshuva before Peiva. We spoke already about Peiva, and in tshuva Pei, the Rav Moshe says an interesting thing. He says, first of all, you should know that he learned the Nishmas Adam differently than the way I learned. If you look inside the Nishmas Adam, it seems to say a little different. Rav Moshe seems to have had a different Havana. Rav Moshe learned that the minig of the oilam to make a boirei pri ha'etz or adama was based on the size of the tree, not like we said. He seemed to say that the reason the oilam made a boirei pri adama on blueberries is because it was under 3 tvachim. With that, says Rav Moshe, so first of all, you should know, says Rav Moshe, not everybody had that minig. By us in Luban, says Rav Moshe, Nishkahat the minig given after the minig from the Radin, after das given the minig from Vilna, the Chayodam, the Menschim, but in the mention of the Nishkahat the minig. That's the first thing. First of all, we didn't have that minig, says Rav Moshe. And we made a boirei priya eitz on blueberries that were under 3 tvachim. First of all. Second of all, says Rav Moshe, today, Zak Rav Moshe, the blueberries grow much higher than 3 tvachim, and therefore for sure you make a boirei priya eitz on blueberries, says Rav Moshe. Number one, because not everybody had that minig. Number two, today it's not negeya because it's higher. And if you go with my reason, Rabbi said today they're chashiv. So l'chayra on blueberries, you would make a boirei priya eitz. Rav Moshe goes further, and Rav Moshe says, let's say there's a place that it's not clear the minig, which I would say is probably most of us. We're not sure what minig are in general. So Rav Moshe says, if you're not sure what the minig is, of course you go with the Magen Avraham. That means if you will find a tree which is under 3 tvachim, and you don't know that you have a specific minig to make a boirei priya eitz adama, you'll make a boirei priya eitz. So let's make a sikkum, because now we're going to go into raspberries. It says Rav Moshe, by us, it's for sure that you make on the blueberries a boirei priya eitz. Why? Because the ones that we have, now it could be, if you go to the forest, those ones are under 3 tvachim, you might have this minig of Rav Moshe, and then you would have to don, but those ones are probably infested with bugs anyways. But the ones that they're selling in the stores or Boisai are from trees that are above 3 tvachim, and they last in the winter. And v'oid, you don't even know if you have such a minig, so maybe you don't have to worry about a minig of under 3 tvachim, and ours are above 3 tvachim. So that's by blueberries, which seems to fit with this proverb that all berries are eitz, except for strawberries. However, now we go into the gishmak shaila of the craisins, the craisin loch, the cranberries. What's the bracha on a cranberry? So here you see the shenkite and the nitzchias of our Torah and the gishmakite of our Torah. Now I want to mention the svara from the Chazain Ish, which is a very important svara to understand a lot of what we're going to say. The Chazain Ish in Orla, in Siman Yud Beis, in Sivkot and Gimel, brings the Yerushalmi, and he brings the Yerushalmi the way the Goyin learns the Yerushalmi. Rabbi say, how do I have a right to mention svaras that maybe the tree is small and short, and there's a minig oilam that says if the tree is short, so then it's not called a tree. So who cares if it's short, not short? Go to the Gemara. The Gemara told us what's a tree. So where do we even begin to don other svaras, which is going to be very negeya? Where do we have a right to even discuss other svaras? HaRav, the Gemara told us the kaveya. What is the the rule is based on if the trunk remains or it doesn't remain, the way we're learning, let's say, like the Goyinim. So who cares size, not size? And today we're going to see other svaras. So the Chazon Ish enlightens us with an incredible svara. And the Chazon Ish brings the Yerushalmi, the way the Goyim learns the Yerushalmi, it's a Yerushalmi in Maisris. Yerushalmi says over there that the Gemara, the Yerushalmi has a question that it brings our klal, that if you have the tree lasting from year to year, if it lasts, so then it's considered an eitz. If it doesn't, it's considered an adama. Nafkamina brachas, nafkamina orla. Says Yerushalmi. So then, how does this work with kruv, with a cabbage? It's not clear. A lot of Yerushalmis are difficult. It's not sure what the question of the Yerushalmi is, but it seems to be that it was pashut to the Gemara that a kruv, it remains the branch, the tree, but afal pikein, of course, it's adama. So the Yerushalmi says, kan bivadai kan bisafik. Says the Vilna Gaon, what does it mean? The only time you need to use the simonim of the Gemara is it's a siman. It's not a siba. It's a siman. The siman of the Gemara is to tell us if you don't know what is this item in front of you, the produce, so then this is the way to figure it out. But let's say it's pleasure to you. You know for sure this is an adama. So then you can make an adama. It's just a siman, Rabbi Yisai. It's not the siba of making something into a bari priya eitz. So the Chazon Ish says, so it was pashut to the Gemara that a kruv, a cabbage, it was pashut is an adama. Says the Chazon Ish, it's not 100% clear to him what now establishes when something is for sure adama and for sure not a tree, or for sure a tree. And it's Hashem, that's what we're going to talk about now. But that is, I guess, the first svara that you just saw. There was a tzad to say that when you have something which is under 3 tefachim, it's for sure not a tree. Now, I showed you from the Gemara not like that. But I'm just opening up your minds to show you that these svaras can broaden our horizons a little bit to see other such svaras. Which brings us into the kreisin lach, the cranberries. What's the mitzias of the cranberry by side? The mitzias is that cranberries are low creeping vines that basically don't have a backbone to stand up straight, even though they get to very high heights. That meaning the length of a cranberry tree could be up into 6 feet to 7 feet. They could be very long branches, very long vines. However, they don't have the ability to stand up, and they grow basically lying on the ground. And how high do they grow when they're on the ground? They grow under 3 tefachim. So the height is under 3 tefachim, but the length, we'll call it, is going to be very, very long. How do we look at this? So this is a very interesting thing, very interesting shayla. So we have to down first. Let's go with Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe Zichron of Bרכת told us that if you don't have a minig, which I think most of us will admit that we don't have a minig, what is our hanhaga, klape, trees that are under 3 tefachim? If you would consider a cranberry tree, which we'll down the shayla in a moment, but if you would consider it to say, I don't look at the length, I look at the height, he's under 3 tefachim. So what's your minig? Rav Moshe will tell you that if you don't have a minig, you anyways are going to make appropriates like the Mogen Avram. I would think, and I once was by Rav Yashiv. Rav Yashiv told me, it's not an our sugya, but he said, if you have somebody that's doing something because he looked in the Mishnah Berurah, or, because he's, the Brachas book says like this, that was not going to be kaveh minig. So I would think that most of us in Europe, they had the minig of what they made on these berries, and etc. By us, I don't think we have a minig. So by us, if you would ask me, what's the bracha on a cranberry? I'll tell you, Chayra, it's going to be a Bari Priya Eitz. And you'll find that in a lot of brachas books. And as a matter of fact, in Rav Efrati Zalzain Gesund, in his sefer, he has a Tshuva sefer, the Yisa Yosef, he brings down that they spoke to this shaila out with Rav Yashiv, and he brings down the Tshuva of Rav Moshe, and he says, Bidiyuk, what we said. He says, according to Rav Moshe, there's no 100% minig. So if you don't have a minig on a bush which is under 3 tefachim, you'll make on it a Bari Priya Eitz. So therefore, l'chayra, it's case closed. We don't have a minig, so we should make a Bari Priya Eitz. And that's the truth is, that's what he says. The other svar of the Mishnah Berurah, that the minig oilam is based on the fact that it's not chashiv pri. So Efrati writes, very rightfully so. He says, you can't say that. These berries, these craisins, they make them by the tens of thousands. And of course, it's for sure considered a pri, and therefore it's considered a pri. And the fact that it's under 3 tefachim doesn't make a difference to us because we don't have a minig, and therefore you'll make on it a Bari Priya Eitz. This is the psak of Rav Yashiv. This is the psak of the Yashiv, the melech of all of Klal Yisrael. However, they asked this question to Yashiv's mechutin. Now it's very interesting. I'll read you the question, what they asked Rav Shlomo Zalman. Listen what they asked him. He asked him, chamutzit. Chamutzit this is found in the Sefer of the same bracha, of the Badr Sefer Brachas. Chamutzit is cranberries, and they describe it. It's an elon that's pachas migimel tvachim, the height, but the orkai, the length, is harbe more than gimel tvachim. What's the bracha? Bar Adama or not? The nidan is, do we look at the height or do we look at the length? Now, I told you, according to Rabbi, who cares? That's what I told you. Who cares? Even if you're going to go and say, we look at the height, and it's under 3 tvachim. But who cares? It's still going to be a bar eitz, because we don't have a minig. Right? And it's chashiv pri. Right? Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, he answered the question. He didn't say who cares. He answered the question. He said, as linan basar gaveyu. You look at its height. The loy basar arkai. And therefore, you'll make on it a bar pri adama. So he, l'chayra, went with this minig. He seemingly has gone with this minig, that under 3 tvachim, you don't make a bar pri eitz, number one. And number two, he said, we also don't look at the length and we look at the height. It's a double chiddush. First of all, who cares if I look at the length? Maybe I'll look at the height and I'll still make a bar pri eitz. And even if you'll tell me that, no, if it's under 3 tvachim, I make a bar pri adama, but maybe in this case, it's got a langa auction as that. Got a whole length over here. So then it's anyways going to be a bar pri eitz. Rav Shlomo Zalman said not like that. He says a bar pri adama. Now this does not fit with our proverb. This doesn't fit with all berries are a boire priya eitz, except for strawberries. Now we're going to have to say all berries doesn't work so well anymore. All berries, which really means only blueberries and blackberries, are boire priya eitz, except for, it's very hard to have a chutz when, the Gemara says, my shire, the high shire, it's going to be except for blueberry, except for strawberries and craisinlach, and craisins are going to also be a boire priya dama. But it's interesting. Rav Yashiv said it's taka, a boire priya eitz. I must tell you that I recently, someone sent me the pictures of the cranberry tree and etc. And I looked a little into the literature about the cranberries and the cranberry bushes and everything. And I saw a svara, which it's interesting. The svara was said not b'gabe ilchos brachas. It was said to in etzem adover. It was said just to enlighten us. Oh, very good. Thank you so much. Oh, very good. You can see it down here on the page. Oh, wow. Look at this. Unbelievable. But can I see the creeping vine? Let's see if we see a creeping vine. That would be much. Let's see. Do we see any creeping vine? It's hard to see in these pictures the creeping. Right there. It's hard to see the creeping vine, but how could you say that priest not chashiv, huh? About the chashiv. But upon him, this creeping vine, Rabbi Yisai, I saw a svara that the goyim say. They were saying it klape something else. And then I saw the Havdil ben Kodesh L'choil. I saw that Rebelski Zeichet Tzadik L'bracha said the same svara. Rebelski wanted to say a svara that we're discussing, do you look at length? Do you look at height? Rebelski said, Rabbi Yisai, a tree that doesn't have a backbone to grow straight is not called a tree. A tree that doesn't have the ability to stand up straight is not called a tree, because its softness shows you that it's not strong. And that is the prerequisite to be a tree, is that you have to have some type of a strength to be able to grow up straight. And it's an interesting svara. It's ke'ein the svara that the Chazain Ish told us. That it's not a siba over here at Baisai. If you have a tree that lasts the winter, then it's exeris akosiv, that's a very great. No. If we know without any suffix that this thing no one in the world is going to consider a tree because it doesn't even have a backbone, it's missing in the backbone of a tree, it's very mistaber that such a thing is not going to be a tree. It's a Baisai, it's at least a suffix. It's at least a suffix. What does that do for us? It makes it that number one, you make a very piyadama. Number two, in Chutz La'aretz, it's going to make it into a Safek Orla. And Safek Orla in Chutz La'aretz is going to be mutter. In Eretz Yisrael, so we won't have that cheshbon because it's going to be a Safek Orla and you're going to still have to wait the 3 years. But L'chayra, even in Eretz Yisrael, you should probably make on it a boire pre hadama. So that's our boisai. The part one, I have about 10 minutes here to discuss the shaila of now that we've left berries with our proverb not working, I want to end with one last shaila, which is the shaila of the papaya and the pineapple. And this is such an interesting geschmack shaila based on everything we spoke today. It's such a geschmack shaila. Rabbi say there was the original discussion was legabe the eggplant. In the Svardish Svarim, they call it a badinjin, and in Israel today it's called chatzilim. Eggplant, chatzilim, you guys I think also know from chatzilim. And the truth is, most of you listening are thinking, what's an afkamina? I know an eggplant is adama, and that for sure is not changing. And you're probably right. But it's very important to know the lumdus of why an eggplant is a bari pri adama. And I'll say bekitzer, because it has nafkaminas and other things. There is a huge world war in the eggplant. There was a sefer called the Kafta V'Ferach. He was in the contemporary of the Beis Yosef, and he wrote a sefer in Eretz Yisrael, and he says you should know an eggplant is treif. It's not a dates, it's not a dama, it's not jackal, it's treif, not kosher. Why? Because the eggplant grows on a tree, very interesting, and it's a tree that seems to last from year to year. Very interesting. It's a tree that lasts from year to year, but it only lasts for 3 years. So it's a tree that lasts for 3 years, and that's it. That's it. So he says, so it's treif because it's a tree. It lasts from year to year, and therefore it only lasts for 3 years. So it has the dinam of a tree, because what's the dinam of a tree like we saw? Something that lasts from year to year. And this thing lasts from year to year. And what's the din of something that lasts from year to year? It's a bari priya eitz, and it's an eitz. And it only lasts for 3 years. So you know that when you have in front of you an eggplant, you know you're eating treif because it doesn't last for more than 3 years. Unbelievable. And this was something that was Marishas HaOilam. The Radbaz, the great Radbaz, the Halik Radbaz, he says, what can I do? I see people eating this. I see people eating the eggplant. So we have to try and figure out what's the pshat. Forget if the bracha is Adam or eitz. But he's telling us it's treif because it only lasts for 3 years. So he went on there at Baz and said an unbelievable chiddush. He said, like we said from the Chazon Ish, these are not gzeres hakosses. He says, if we have other simonim that'll show us it's not a tree, that's also going to be enough to call it not a tree. And he said, what's his simon? His simon is that the eggplant has produce, the eggplant tree has produce even in the first year. Did you ever see a tree that has produce in the first year? An apple tree, an orange tree, they don't grow in the first year. First, there has to be a chashivas. And then afterward, once they have that chashivas, it gives off its produce in the next year. But an eggplant is something that grows even in the first year, it grows. Lo matzina, we never heard of such a thing that grows even in the first year. So that is not a tree. It's an adama. And that's why they eat it. And the Beit Yosef, the Rabbi Alan brings down in Chelik Beis and Siman Lamed that the Beit Yosef ate it, and that was his reason. And the Talmidim of the Chaim Vital ate it, and this was their reasoning that it's not called a tree because it gives off produce already in the first year. So therefore, it's a Vadai Adam. Vadai Adam, because even the Gdolei Sfardim in Eretz Yisrael ate it, which it can't be a Safek, because then it would be Safek Orla. It was Vadai Adam based on this Svara. That was the Svara of the Radbaz. Grows in the first year, and therefore you can eat it for all 3 years, and you make it on a bari pri adama. The Al-Shich, he says that this is the Al-Shich, the Mam Al-Shich on the Torah. Al-Shich says a different svar. He says a tree is something that gets better and better. Masha'en kain, a vegetable, a tree that only gets worse and worse and worse. And by the 4th year, you don't even have a produce anymore. It just gets worse and worse and worse. It doesn't even last more than 3 years. That's not a tree. And that's the xias of an eggplant. The Chazain Ish says an unbelievable svara, something to think about this svara, the Chazon Ish, Rabbeinu Agadol. The Chazon Ish says, you know what? The reason is an eggplant is considered an adama because it would come out otherwise that an eggplant is aser, like the kafta b'ferach. And the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't make something for nothing. If he made it a fruit that you're never going to be allowed to eat, what? Just I'm a beat to make fun of you? So it can't be. Must be. That's the raya that it's a vegetable. That's the raya, it's adama. Because otherwise, Hashem never made something that it's usher to eat. It can't be. Now, this is, I want you guys, Rabbi said it's a Chazon Ish, Rabbi Shal Yisrael. I want you to, ask today at the table, ask your friends and family, what's the pshat in this Chazon Ish? Rabbi said Hashem didn't make things that are treif. Who did he make chazer for? For Vamin, for Goyim. No? And Hashem didn't make, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first tree that Rabbi Shalom made was the Eitz Hadas. And what was the whole purpose of that tree? It was also treif, and you also weren't allowed to eat it. So I don't know, maybe Hashem made it for Goyim, maybe he made it for animals, maybe he made it for Nisayan, but that's the Chazon Ish, another svara of an eggplant. A new svara, the Hilchos Ketana says, nah, I don't agree with the Radbaz's svara. That's not a svara. He said, I'll tell you the svara. The svara is that excuse me, excuse me, the Hilchos Ktanis is brought in Chelik Aleph, in Siman Pei Gimel. He brings down that anything that's hollow on the inside, it doesn't have a real strong tree. It's the trunk is basically like a pipe. So that's considered a conduit to the ground. So that's not called a tree. A tree is something, even if it lasts, but if it's not, doesn't have an inside, it's a hollow inside, that's not enough. That's not called a tree. So we have so many svaras here at Baisai. We have a svara that it gives off fruit in the first year. That's why it's not a tree. We have a svara that the tree, the produce gets worse and worse and worse. That's why it's not a tree. We have a svara that it's got a hollow inside. We have a svara that it can't be a tree that only lasts for 3 years. Such a thing can't be. We have a svara that it's bichlal. Excuse me, Rabbi Isai. We have a svara. Kitza, these are all the svaras. No, what's an afkamina? On an eggplant, you make adama. On an eggplant, it's not orla. On an eggplant, it's not even suffix orla. Okay, but the nafkamina is papaya. A papaya tree, which I'm sure I'm about to see a picture of. A papaya tree is something very interesting. It's unique. Oh, God bless you and your family. Thank you, Dr. Lederer. A papaya is something that unique. It does seem to grow fruit in the first year. The papaya tree does seem to grow fruit in the first year. So we do have that svara, but we saw that svara of the Radbaz wasn't enough. And look at this tree, Rabbi Isai. Can you imagine explaining to a guy that this is not a tree? What's the shaila? Look at it. Looks like a tree. Oh, a beautiful tree. I'm going to tell you something more interesting about this tree, Rabbi Isai. In the first year, it grows 10 feet. In the second year, it goes 20 feet. In the third year, 30, 40. It keeps on going and going. It comes a point that it's not going to die for them to keep around this tree. You know why? Because it's too difficult to harvest the produce because the produce is so high up. So the papaya tree is something very difficult for them to upkeep. So therefore, what's the bracha on a papaya? So let's see what the papaya has. The papaya is lacking some of our svaras. You can't say the fruit gets worse and worse every year. It's true by the 4th and 5th year, it becomes very difficult to get to, but it's not worse. The fruit is a very good fruit. So we lost that svara. But the papaya tree, it does, Rabbi Isai, have a hollow trunk. The trunk is hollow. Now this is extremely negay, Rabbi Isai, because the Shevet HaLevi was very bothered to go with just the red baz. And the Shevet HaLevi says he's chayshish most of the papayas that are in the shuk in Eretz Yisrael. And again, America won't have this problem because it'll be at least a suffix and suffix orlas mutter. But most of the papayas that are in Eretz Yisrael are a suffix orla. Why? Because most of them, if not roiv of them, are from the first 3 years, like I mentioned to you, because it's very difficult to cut them down in the 4th year and the 5th year. So therefore, most of the papayas that you're going to find in the shuk in Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Isai, are taka from orla. So to be saimich just on the red baz because it grows in the first year, the Shevet HaLevi wasn't so happy about that. But I saw that the Orla Tzion L'chayr rightfully says, but we have the other svara. We have the svara that it has a hollow inside. Very interesting that the Orla Tzion held that svara is so strong that it doesn't even create the Orla problem. And L'chayr, this is why if you see somebody that on a papaya in Eretz Yisrael, he makes a bari priya eitz, you tell that Jew, you're a big stira. Because if you're making a bari priya eitz, then you hold it to tree. If you hold it to tree, it's probably not kosher because they only last for 3 years in Eretz Yisrael, and then they cut them down and replant them. So you better be making a bari priya dama, or you're in big trouble. Which will end off with the last shaila, which is probably the most shocking of all shailas, which is the pineapple. The pineapple, Rabbi Isai, if you look in the old brachas books, they all say pineapple's a dama. And they say, why? All the old books, they write, you know why? Because a pineapple is just made like a banana tree. It's the same thing like a banana tree. Rabbi Isai, I'm going to tell you, and you're seeing pictures, I'm going to tell you what you're seeing in these pictures. That is not emes. It's false. Pineapple trees, yes, last from year to year. And it is absolutely false. A pineapple tree does last from year to year. So then why is it that the whole minig olam is to make on a pineapple a boirei priyadama? On a pineapple, you should make a boirei priyatz. It's a tree that lasts from year to year. And I'll tell you more, you don't even have the red baz. Rabbi Isai, the pineapple does not give off the produce in the first year. So then why is it that you make a Bari Pri Adama? You should make a Bari Pri Eitz. This is shocking. And Rabbi Isai will say even stronger. So then it should be Orla. And someone told me there's a 28-page contrast that came out in Lakewood that he said the pineapples in America, they're all not kosher because they're Vadai Orla, because they only last for 3 years. What do I mean they only last for 3 years? Because the pineapple tree in the first year gives you a pineapple 100% size. The next year, 60%. The third year, 30%. And by the fourth year, they say it's not worth the whole entire thing. So therefore, they don't keep it around. So then what's the pshat in the Minhag Olam that everybody eats pineapples and everybody makes a Bari Pri Adama? So Rabbi Isai, here you're going to have to say big chedushim. Big chedushim, because we lost many of the svaras. But you're going to have to say like that svara, like we said from the Chazon Ish, that the Rebbeinu Shel Olam is not going to make a product that you're never going to get hana from. Rabbi Isai, who in their right mind would plant a pineapple tree to just eat it in the fourth year when it's this little tiny bud in the pineapple? So then why would the Rebbeinu Shel Olam make something for nothing, which we saw as a big chiddush? Maybe he made it for Goyim. No. But then we saw another svara Rabbi Isai, and that was the svara of the Maram Alshich. That the Maram Alshich, and can hear this is what the Minhag Olam is saying, that the Alshich told us that anything that gets worse and worse and worse, even though the Alshich was talking about that it tasted worse and worse, but Mistama also if the Yanika is worse and worse. If it gets worse and worse and worse every year, that's not a fruit. That's going to be called an Adama. But this is a great chiddush. The Tila David has a different way of explaining. He's not going on pineapples, obviously. It only came out pineapples, I think, 80 years ago. But he has a different svara, a svara that since it only grows out of the branch each year is a new branch on the pineapple. It's like a shoot. It's a new shoot each year that comes out. And I'll tell you something else about that shoot, Rabbi Isai. The shoot really just leans against the tree, and the tree is really not so chashiv. So we consider it to be just a tube which is connecting it to the ground. And then I'll tell you, Rabbi Isai, something even more interesting. I must tell you that it's true we find that pineapples last from year to year in Hawaii, but not everywhere in the world do they last from year to year. You know why? Because Hawaii is a ganz summer freilich. The whole entire year is hot. So that doesn't prove to us, Rabbi Isai, that it could last the winter. It proves to us that in a climate that is never winter, it lasts. And that's another svara why the Minhag Olam is to make on pineapples a Bari Pri Adama, and that's why in America there's no shaila you can have pineapples, and that there are at least a suffix oil. The only shaila I'm going to end off the oil with is that these are very nice svaras. But to say it's not a suffix, no, it's at least a suffix. So why in Eretz Yisrael do they eat pineapples? That's a very big shaila. In Eretz Yisrael it should be at least a suffix orla, because these are good svaras, but they're at least a suffix. So it should be a suffix orla. No, if it's a suffix orla, it's in Chutz La'aretz it's mutter, and in Chutz La'aretz it's adama. But in Eretz Yisrael, l'chayra, it should be at least a suffix. I was told that in the Beis Medrash of Eliashiv, they were very, very chayshish for this. I don't know exactly. I have to look into this a little bit further. But the Kapanim Rabbi Isai, we today are trying to gemacht bracha. When we learn the sugya be'in, to zamin, be'aguda echas, when we learn the sugya bracha, so that the vada is a schus that the Rebbeinu Shalom should shower on us bracha, and we should be zeicha to be karev mamish, that all of that bracha should shower down to us, that we should be zeicha to get back together be'emes ba'aguda echas in our Beit Midrashim and our Batei Knesiyos, be karev mamish b'meira b'yameinu amen.